Well, of course, the Conservatives are enjoying their 80-seat majority. It was a tricky election night for the Liberal Democrat Party. Jo Winston began the campaign sitting opposite me in this very studio, claiming that she was a realistic candidate for Prime Minister. But on Thursday night, she lost her seat and saw just 11 MPs returned for her party. Well, that means the Lib Dems are left with one less MP than they had after the 2017 election and 10 less than at the start of the campaign, because all of the people that had defected from other parties failed to win their seats. Well, joining us now to discuss where they go next is the party's joint acting leader, Sir Ed Davey. Thank you very much for being on the programme. Let's address the elephant in the room first. There's a vacancy at the top of your party. Are you planning on running for the leadership again?
Listen, we've just had a very tough election. I'm delighted to have won my seat, but I'm talking to colleagues who've had some really tough times and lost their seat. What we're going to do is, as acting leader, I'm going to ensure that we review the general election properly, learn those lessons and make sure we're fit to oppose this Boris Johnson government as it is our job to do. So that's the role I'll be focusing in on in my role as acting leader.
And can you give us a bit of the idea of the time frame for this? When is the leadership election likely to take place?
Well, the board of the party is going to meet in January and is going to set the timetable for the leadership election. As acting leader, I'll obviously be supporting the board, but focusing in on talking to our members. Clearly, not just our party's members, but supporters and many people who want a progressive centre party are deeply disappointed at the moment. And I think it's vital that they see politicians admitting where mistakes were made, but also standing up to this quite nationalistic right-wing Conservative government that's been elected.
So just to be crystal clear, you're not ruling yourself in or out?
It's too early for that. We've got to focus on ensuring we learn the lessons properly in quite a deep, profound way. I mean, one of the lessons I have to say is it can be very difficult for the Democrats to make progress when there is a hard left leader of the Labour Party. We found that in 1983 with Michael Foot. We found it in spades in 1929 with Jeremy Corbyn. If you look at the Conservative leaflets in Liberal Democrat constituencies, it wasn't so much get Brexit done they were talking about. They were saying if you vote Liberal Democrat, you'll get Jeremy Corbyn. And that fear factor was a massive issue in the general election.
At the same time, though, many people would look at this and think this is a perfect opportunity for a party of the centre ground to come through, when many people feel Boris Johnson is a right-wing Prime Minister and then you have an unpopular leader on the left wing. Surely this gives you space in the centre ground that you failed to grasp.
Well, we clearly failed to grasp it, and we need to learn lessons of why. But I'm pointing out to you that there were a lot of Liberal Conservatives who really don't like Brexit, don't like Boris Johnson, but they actually fear Jeremy Corbyn even more. And you don't have to believe me. Look at the leaflets that the Conservative Party were putting out in the key seats we were trying to win. And they played on that fear factor of Jeremy Corbyn. And what I hope is that we can see Labour Party reform, because we do need to work cross-party, we need to cooperate. We tried that very much in the last Parliament as we tried to get a people's vote. We didn't quite get the full cooperation that we needed. We tried that at this election. We were working with the Green Party, Plaid Cymru. We tried to work across party boundaries, but in the first past the post, with a very hard left and popular leader of the Labour Party, it proved very, very difficult.
Now, when you were on the show before the election, I asked what you would have done differently to Jo Winston if you'd been elected leader. We could just have a quick look at what you told me before this. You said that you'd have done nothing differently. I think she's been doing a fantastic job. I think her leadership on Brexit has been inspiring. What would you actually have done differently?
Well, I would certainly have done exactly what Jo did on the Brexit question. We are a pro-European party. We believe Britain should remain in the EU. And I'm very proud that Jo led a party where she made that a central
proposition. You've got 11 seats. I think the question is more about what you'd have done differently, not the same.
Well, as acting leader, I want to work out what went wrong.
And what do you think did go wrong?
Well, let us look at this in detail. I was at the board meeting yesterday in Liberal Democrat HQ, where we have set up a general election review. We'll look at all the details. No stone will be left unturned. Clearly, we must have made mistakes, or we wouldn't have had the result that we did. But all I'm saying is, judging from what I've already heard from members and from candidates and from party activists, the Conservative Party beat us in many seats that we were expecting to win because they played on the fear of Jeremy Corbyn. That's just a fact. That'll be fed into the review. We'll also have to own up to the mistakes that we made. I'm not denying that whatsoever.
So what are they? Because it does feel a little bit like, you're blaming Jeremy Corbyn. You say you wouldn't have done anything differently on Brexit than Jo Swinson. So what were the mistakes? You can't just blame external factors for everything.
You're asking for me to rush to early judgment. And I'm saying I'm not going to.
But you must have a sense after you've been out door knocking. You've been out. You must have a sense of what.
Well, let me give you one example, which I think will be picked up in the review. I expect. I think we didn't get the other messages over about what Liberal Democrats stand for, and we didn't get beyond the Stop Brexit position. So, for example, we've got a very strong position on climate change. In fact, Joe and I both said during the general election that in many ways tackling the climate emergency was even bigger than stopping Brexit. But I'm not sure if that very strong Liberal Democrat record and that strong set of Liberal Democrat policies on climate change got through to enough voters. And I think one of the challenges we failed to manage is making sure that people understood that the Liberal Democrats aren't just the Stop Brexit Party. We've got many other very attractive policies which should have brought more people to vote to it.
What about the policy to revoke Article 50, to cancel Brexit if you won a majority? Was that a distraction?
Well, I think I want to look at the data on that because we did see data where it was bringing people to us, as well as some data showing it wasn't working. But because I actually believe in evidence, I believe in evidence-based policies. It's why I don't think we should leave the EU, because the evidence is actually we're better off in the EU. I want to see the evidence before I rush to judgment.
The evidence is that you only won 11 MPs, isn't it?
It was not a good night, I'm not going to pretend, but there were glimmers of hope. Let's remember that. Our vote share went up. We're now second in many more seats than we were before the last election. So I think Liberal Democrats can rebuild. I think we can come back strong. And I think if we focus on those very positive messages, defending human rights, for example, we've got a government that's been elected on a mandate to attack the human rights legislation, to actually go after the courts and reform the courts, attacking, I think, the independence of the judiciary on things like judicial review. We've got good liberal value issues which we can champion. And I tell you one thing that's going to happen very soon. We're going to see, I hope and expect, the report on Russian interference in British elections actually published. I think that will be very interesting, and it will be Liberal Democrats who will be holding Boris Johnson in person to account for his links to Russian business people.
Was the biggest mistake of the election campaign backing the election in the first place from the Liberal Democrats? It seems like it was an act of political suicide in retrospect.
No, I think that's not looking at what the dilemma was. And the dilemma was this. We had tried time and time again to get a people's vote, to get a referendum so that people would have the final say. We had 17 attempts at that, but unfortunately the Labour Party didn't show up in the numbers that were required. And therefore, we were then faced with the Boris Johnson withdrawal bill getting a majority, with 19 Labour MPs supporting it. And there was a real fear that that withdrawal agreement would get through the House of Commons. And so the dilemma was this. Did we have an election after Britain had legally withdrawn from the EU with the Withdrawal Act, or did we have one before? That was the choice. And, we were faced with this, I think, really meaningless slogan of get Brexit done. But if we'd not had an early election, we'd have had some sort of other meaningless slogan like let's move on. And so it was a real difficult judgment to make. And I think people at the moment are not seeing what actually was in the face of the British Parliament at the time.
One of the people, of course, who's paid perhaps the ultimate price for that decision is Jo Swinson herself. She lost her seat. Do you feel sorry for her?
Absolutely. The whole party is deeply upset and disappointed. Jo was a friend and a colleague, and I want her back in Parliament as soon as possible. She has so much to offer British politics, and our thoughts are with her and her family, but we know that she has a bright future, and we thank her for what she did. And I hope that we can ensure that what she argued for and her legacy on the Brexit issue, we can continue, because Liberal Democrats will continue to oppose Brexit. in Parliament. I'm sure he'll get his legislation now. The withdrawal agreement will go through. But now the hard part starts for Boris Johnson and Conservatives. I do not believe they can get Brexit done in the next year, as they said they've done. They've told voters, Leavers and Remainers, they'll get Brexit done next year. They won't.
Your words there about Jo Swinson were perhaps not quite mirrored by everybody who watched those results coming in. We saw the video of Nicola Sturgeon, the leader of the SNP, celebrating the result when Jo Swinson lost her seat. Have a quick look at that on the screen. I'm sure you've seen this. What's your reaction?
She's not very dignified, is she? And I think that approach to politics, taking glee in someone else's defeat, is, in the way that she does, a very personal way, isn't appropriate for the First Minister of Scotland.
OK. Ed Davey, thank you very much for being on the programme this morning. Thank you.